Lesson 2 is Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, labor leader, activist, and feminist. Here she is in 2 additional photos. From these, you see her delivering a speech in 1913 and walking on a crowded street, perhaps in a parade, with fellow strike leader Bill Haywood and several young children in 1912. These 2 photos provide more context for her life story. One resource does not reveal the entire truth. Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, daughter of Irish immigrants, was born in Concord, New Hampshire in 1890, then moved to New York City. She was introduced by her parents to socialism. She was only 16 when she gave her first public speech, What Socialism Will Do for Women. As a result of her political activities, Flynn was expelled from high school. In January 1912, the American Woolen Company in Lawrence, Massachusetts, reduced the number of hours laborers would work each week, resulting in a decrease in wages. For years, unrest among immigrant workers grew, as they suffered poor working and living conditions. The wage decrease proved to be the last straw, resulting in a walkout strike and the involvement of the IWW, or the Industrial Workers of the World. The strike became known as the Lawrence Textile Strike, or the Bread and Roses Strike, of 1912. When 2 strike leaders were arrested for crimes they did not commit, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn and Bill Haywood arrived to replace them and run the strike. Faced with growing negative publicity surrounding the children's exodus, when immigrant families sent their children to New York because they could no longer care for them, the American Woolen Company gave in to all the strikers' demands on March 12, 1912. It was a great success for Elizabeth Gurley Flynn and the IWW. How could you know or learn all this from the photo in the preceding lesson? Obviously, you could not. One photo, without setting or caption, provides insufficient information about this famous woman. One resource does not reveal the entire truth. Next, for the remainder of our concluding lesson, we will analyze one last photograph in order to gain a full understanding of the Bread and Roses strike. Often, historical events are presented as having 2 sides, but history, as is life, is more complex than boiling something down to 2 sides. When examining this photograph, we will draw from our background knowledge. What do you already know about the Bread and Roses strike? What have you learned about analyzing photographs? What can photographs tell you about their historical context? As a warm-up, take a few minutes to pause the module and jot down answers to these questions. Then, you'll discuss your answers with your table group. Be prepared to share your thoughts with the rest of the class before moving on with the video. Pause the video and discuss these questions now. Now, let's take a look at the last photograph. In Mr. Doyle's lesson, Lesson 1 in the module, you learned a few different ways to analyze a photograph. Regardless of which method you prefer, remember to observe the photograph for details and clues. Apply your background knowledge, and then draw a conclusion. Pause the video and take some time to work. Now that you've had some time to consider the photograph, my questions for you are as follows. What can you tell about this man? Refer to specific evidence from the photograph to support your ideas. What do you think his role was in the Bread and Roses strike? Make an inference. What was his relationship to the young boy, Salvatore Guatierto, and Elizabeth Gurley Flynn? Lastly, who was the intended audience, and what was the purpose of taking this photograph? Again, pause the video here to take some time to work and respond to these questions. So, when observing the photograph, you probably noticed the man's clothing. He's wearing a 3-piece suit that looks new and not at all worn down. Also, he's wearing a tie and his shirt collar is stiff, a sign that it's new and in good condition. Additionally, notice the furniture in the photograph. The chair is ornate and grand looking. It looks expensive, as does the table the man is leaning on. Further, the man is clearly posing for the camera. He's aware his picture is being taken. The photograph is a portrait, and portraits were typically a sign of wealth. This, along with his clothing and the furniture, allows us to infer that the man is wealthy. So what was his role in the strike? Based on evidence, he was probably not a laborer or striker. Perhaps he owned or ran one of the companies. He may have even been in a high political position, such as mayor or governor. He probably knew of Flynn, since she was a strike leader. The boy was likely just another face, one of his countless workers. Likely, if he met Flynn or Guaterto, there would have been a lot of tension, assuming, as we are, that they were on opposite sides of the strike. Since this is a portrait, the intended audience for this photograph was probably the man himself, or his family. Perhaps he hung the picture in his office, or his study at work. Think of portraits we all have today, such as getting your school picture taken every year. They are pictures you most often share and display for your family and friends. At this point, I'll reveal who the man in the photograph is. His name was William Wood, and he was the owner of the American Woolen Company, including Wood Mill in Lawrence. As a wealthy mill owner and employer of 40,000 laborers, Wood became one of the most hated men during the 1912 strike. Workers despised his bonus system, which interlinked the performance of each worker, making the weaver's bonus hinge on the output of the spinner, and so on down the production line. Additionally, workers would not receive a bonus if they missed more than 1 day of work per month. You can see why strikers and laborers did not like him. However, Wood was a complex man and was the son of Portuguese immigrants himself. He began his career as a laborer, earning only $4 a week, gradually working his way up and marrying into a rich family. By the time of his death, he earned $1 million a year. He believed, quote, "Work is whatever you make it, hardship or happiness, a punishment or a pleasure. I have worked practically all my life, and I love it." End quote. Simply, Wood didn't understand the strikers' point of view. He believed that he worked his way up, so why couldn't they? Lastly, for our last step, let's summarize the lesson. This summarizer will prepare you for the final assessment, which is to write a script imagining a conversation between William Wood, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, and Salvatore Guaterto. You'll receive more information about this assignment from your teacher. So to summarize right now is a 3-2-1. Identify 3 pieces of advice you would give a student who has never analyzed a photograph. Identify 2 important facts about the Bread and Roses strike, and identify 1 way strikers or mill owners could have used any of these photographs to convince the public to join their side.